Is America retreating from the world stage? If the mood music from the campaigns of the US presidential frontrunners is anything to go by, then that would seem to be the case. I'm joined by Gideon Rachman, the FT's chief foreign affairs commentator, to discuss this. Gideon, you've just been in the US and you've written this week about this sense of isolationism is now back in America. I mean, we've had it in the past, but is that the case? And if so, why?
Well, I think that certainly if you look at the campaigns run by Donald Trump, who looks like he may well win the Republican nomination, and by Bernie Sanders, who won the Democratic primary in New Hampshire, they're often seen as ideological opposites, Trump on the far right, Sanders on the far left. But in fact, on foreign policy and on trade, they're strikingly similar, so that on trade, they both want to repudiate a lot of the international trade agreements that the US has signed, saying that they've been proved to be very bad for American workers. And on foreign policy, Trump sounds very militaristic. He says he'll rebuild the US military, that he'll do more bombing in the Middle East and so on. But actually, his attitude to security relationships seems to be to pull back from a lot of America's alliances, to do less in the world. And Sanders takes the classic left-wing position, which is that America should not be the world's policeman. And I think it's in an interesting context because we're already at a phase where President Obama is widely accused in the rest of the world of having pulled America back from its global commitments, of being in some way responsible for the chaos in the Middle East because America's not getting in there to sort it out. But I'd argue that actually Obama, compared to the frontrunners in the presidential election campaign, is really an internationalist compared to what may come soon.
And is their message, are their respective messages resonating with voters, do you sense?
Yes, I think clearly they've struck a chord, and I think it's because it relates to this sense that you get amongst a lot of American voters, that they're unhappy with the way the country's going. If you look at these famous right track, wrong track thing, something like 70% of Americans think America's on the wrong track. And the main domestic issue is economic insecurity and income inequality. And Trump and Sanders have both linked that to trade and said that, that America has somehow been sort of, mishandled by its trading partners. Trump says, for example, that he will somehow make sure that in future Americans buy American cars and American machinery, not Japanese and South Korean machinery. Now, that's straight protectionism. And in the same way, Sanders has said, free trade has been an unadulterated disaster for the American worker. And the other element is the security element, the disillusionment with foreign wars, which really stems from the Iraq and Afghan wars. And Obama, in some senses, already reflected that. He ran as an anti-war candidate. He's been markedly reluctant to get America involved in more military campaigns around the world. But Trump and Sanders both say, well, he's already doing too much. Why don't our allies do more for themselves?
How will this affect then the other candidates? And I mean, will the likes of Hillary Clinton have to sort of adjust their message on foreign policy to reflect that?
Well, I think they already are to a degree, so that Hillary, for example, when she was Secretary of State, was a big backer of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a huge new trade initiative with Asia, a new free trade agreement. She's now, on the campaign trail, come out against it. Not all of the candidates, however, are attacking. I mean, I think Marco Rubio, if it ends up as being Trump versus Rubio, which some people think it will be for the Republican nomination, Rubio has a more traditional, if you might call, neoconservative view of foreign policy, which stresses the need for American engagement and more military spending, but actually using that kind of power in an almost George W. Bush-like style. So that would be quite an interesting contrast with Trump. And as for Hillary, although I think she is tacking for campaign purposes, I suspect if she got into office, she would be actually a little bit more assertive than Obama has been.
Outside the US, should people be braced for an America that is slightly a bit more isolationist or has pulled back a little bit?
Look, it depends very much who wins. I think if Hillary wins, then probably not. I think if Trump or Sanders, although that still feels like an outside chance, if they were to get in, then all bets are off. Beyond that, there is a long-term thing that is pushing America towards what you might call a slightly more isolationist approach, which is that the US economy is no longer quite as dominant in the global economy, and America has discovered that although it still has the world's largest military by a long way and the most sophisticated military, that winning wars in the military phase doesn't actually buy the stability that they want. That seems to be one of the lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan. And so I think those economic and security forces are pushing America towards a more restrained role in the world, more or less regardless of who wins in the White House.
Gideon Rachman, thank you very much.